Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 139 of The Casual Author. Today is Monday, October 21st, 2024, as I record this. And today we're talking to Bob Williston about how words are sharper than the sword. Talk a little bit about his book, about leaving his religious affiliation based on bad experiences. He does talk a little bit about some very unfortunate topics, particularly that of sexual abuse of children. We don't go into a lot of details, but if that's something that makes you uncomfortable, then just want to warn you a little bit ahead of time. But he talks a lot about why authoring was cathartic for him and how it helped him bring the truth or the reality of his situation to where he is today. So he writes a lot of books around the narrative of unfortunate things and happenstances within religious affiliations, his specific experience, and how writing that out in this case was sharper than the sword, because he was able to expose some things for some people that were being overlooked by other people. So very interesting conversation. Talk a lot about the power of words and how he continues to shape the world as best as he can with his words. So I hope you join us for that conversation. It's very enlightening and he's very insightful in terms of authoring. So you may have noticed that the past couple weeks I did not do a podcast episode. I know 2 weeks ago I said I was going to be skipping 1 week, and then life just kind of spun out of control a little bit. And so fell off the bandwagon a little bit in terms of making an episode. I don't even think I can go into all of the updates for the homestead. Everything just kind of came to a head over the past couple of weeks. I was exhausted, wasn't getting a lot of sleep. All of this homestead where we were working from, I'd get up at 5 a.m. to try to author things, and we wouldn't go to bed till past 11 o'clock for, a week or two at a time. So as you can imagine, the podcast kind of fell by the wayside. I didn't worry too much about it because I figured, life happens. I can't account for everything. So yeah, it just wasn't in the mindset to record something last week. But we're back today, and I'll try to talk in an abbreviated way about all the things that are going on, because it's amazing how much happens in the course of 2 weeks. So first and foremost, I think I may have mentioned some of these things 2 weeks ago when everything kind of started, but we processed 51 chickens, and that in and of itself takes quite a bit of time. But at the same time, I got 9 tons of hay delivered just a few days before butchering the chickens. And if you've ever moved hay, it's a kind of slow process, and I had to move it all by hand. Now, I'm the only one who's strong enough to lift each of those bales, which is about 85 to 100 pounds each. They're pretty hefty, but yeah, my 10-year-old is definitely not lifting those. Granted, the children still helped me out. They would climb to the top of the truck, the stack of hay on the truck, and they would push with all their might until these big bales would bounce down onto the ground, and then I'd pick them up. So they definitely helped me. It was great, but man, they got tired out. It took me 3 days to move this hay, only because I was only working on it for an hour and a half each day. I had full-time work. I still have to work. So I'd work, go move hay, and then the craziness of night getting the kids to bed. Anyway, processing these chickens, we were able to do it all in one day, the actual, butchering part of it, but then piecing them out, you had to chill them for 24 hours so that, it helps them be prepared for the actual piecing process. And then on top of that, we are building a new house for our cow. So the cow thing kind of happened unexpectedly. We didn't expect to get a cow this year. We hoped we would, but so we just had small squat structures for our goats built out of pallets. Pallets are very versatile. You can put some OSB or some plywood particle board on the sides of pallets, and then you're able to put together this house. The problem is it's too short for the cow. She couldn't fit in it. So she's just been without a house in the rain. Fortunately, it's not snowing yet, but we knew we needed to build something for her so she can get out of the wet and the cold. Um, So yeah, I needed to go buy the materials, and we hoped to do delivery, but the delivery was going to be way too slow. We wouldn't be getting the materials until later this week, and I needed to get started on it then. So I went and bought, a bunch of materials, very, very heavy materials, had to pack it all on a truck. This is all happening in the exact same time period. So, yes, then on top of that, we in order for our cow to have her next baby in a timely manner, we need her to be bred now, pretty much, for the timing to work out next year, because cows have a gestation period of 9 months like humans. So we also got a bull. We didn't buy the bull, we just borrowed it from someone. But, the chaos of getting the bull here, dealing with an unexpected animal, he was really gentle for the most part, but still, he was kind of pushy. And you just want to be careful with bulls. If they get out of hand, then that can get out of hand pretty quick. So just had to shuffle things all around a lot, make sure kids couldn't go in the pen by themselves while the bull was here. So I had to do pretty much everything there. Not a complaint, it just things were slower because I had to account for this big bull. Um, Anyway, I won't go into all the finer details, but long story short, there was a lot of things going on. And we realized that this was a bad idea. We want to space things out a little bit better this next year. Granted, some of these things were out of our control, such as the delivery of the hay and the delivery of the materials. I think we just overestimated the capacity of the store to deliver these materials for us. But, all in all, we're on the other side of it. I'm still a little bit tired, but catching up on sleep. And I at least feel like I have the mind to get back into the podcast episodes. Keep in mind that it's amazing how far behind you can get with 2 weeks. I might not be able to consistently put episodes out every week for the next few months until I catch myself back up and remind myself how to do all the processes, when things get out of hand, you reevaluate the efficiency of the processes you're doing. So that's what's happening right now. In any case, really excited to get back into it. I had a lovely conversation with a few other authors recently, and I'm really excited to share those with you. So, um, I believe that's everything in terms of Homestead, kind of shifted into authoring here. In terms of authoring, so I have gratefully been able to keep up progress despite the craziness. I know that doesn't make any logical sense. I've determined that writing, creativity, editing, it's all part of this being. It's part of my being. And if I skip days, I find myself my capacity is lower, my patience is lower, and I think it's because I'm missing that part of me. And so knowing that, I made a point to continue getting up as early as I can, right? 5 o'clock doesn't always happen depending on how late we go to bed the night before, but I've continued my progress. So I took a break from writing because I finished Dwarf Blooded a couple weeks ago. So that's book 3 of the Hidden Heritage series. Love how it ended. Didn't expect it to end that way, but turned out great. There's kind of like a minor arc that's closed off. It's the third book of a 6 book series, so it seemed appropriate to kind of close off an arc, and then it launches in kind of the second arc of this 6 book series. Um, but yeah, I take a break from writing, not because I need a break from writing itself, because I need a break from writing kind of that story. I didn't want to launch into book 4 until I'd given myself some space from the story. Interestingly, though, I have made a kind of a goal to edit and write every day, at least a little bit. Now, there's a reason for this. Some of you may be listening and say, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you edit and write at the same time? Um, the main issue is if I get straight into editing for too long, my satisfaction with the authoring just dips down really low. As much as, editing is important, I struggle with it. It's something that I don't enjoy. I don't know if it's my ADHD. I don't know if it's just, I don't know what it is, but I don't want to edit. And it's just like this physical barrier. My mind cannot get started on editing. I can do it for, a week or two, but then books take quite a bit longer to edit for me because one, I write long books, and two, there's a lot of mess to clean up. Once I get to about a week, week and a half, I just don't want to do anything. I'm done. I just don't want to edit because I miss the writing process. I miss the creativity. And so I realized, look, if I'm going to be slow editing anyway, why should I destroy my interest in my, I guess, my motivation for creativity by not writing at the same period? So I figure if I write for a little bit during the day, and then later in the afternoon or in the evening, I do some editing at the same time, always, then I can make progress through editing and writing at the same time. And it turned out to work perfectly, right? I get up, my morning is very creative. I can write, right? I get that satisfaction of writing, getting words on the page, building the story, and then I can edit, because I've had that satisfaction. My cup has been filled from the creative standpoint. And I'm hoping that will make editing not so painful and I'll be able to do it for longer periods of time. There was an advantage as well because currently I'm editing Demon Blooded, which is the second book, while writing Dwarf Blooded, which is the third book. And there were a number of things that while I was writing Dwarf Blooded, I was like, oh, that's right. I was reminded about a character, how they were, some finer details that it's not that I'd forgotten that they were written in Demon Blooded, but it just was an extra reminder to be like, oh, I need to keep this going in this third book. And so I think it's going to be very beneficial to edit a previous book while writing a new book because it's going to help me compare some things, particularly when they're in the same series. So happy with the results, hoping that I can keep that up. It does increase my writing capacity quite a bit. I can get more books out more quickly. So I'm hoping to adhere to one book every 6 month period, which I think I can keep up with. I already talked about 2 weeks ago how I kind of actually forward scheduled all of those dates just to make sure that I can get a book every 6 months. So yeah, excited to have finished that book. Excited to be reading Demon Blooded. I'm almost done editing it for the first round, reading through it, and then I'll pump it into Pro Writing Aid, and then it's off to the editor, the actual line editor, at the beginning of next month. So it's coming right around the corner. Very excited about that. Let's see. In terms of authoring, otherwise, yeah, not a ton of updates other than I know that I need to somehow break back into social media. I'm struggling to get back into it. I think part of it is there's more information than you need to know, but part of it is that the timing, because I don't want to use. I found it problems with feeling pressure to do social media during my most creative times, and then that steals away my writing because, social media is just consuming. Even editing one 30-second video takes way too much time. And I'd rather do that for writing versus I have time to edit, like say early more, or to make videos early morning when I'm still kind of not quite awake for writing. But problem is I look like crap. So transparently, when you wake up first thing in the morning, you're not at your best physically. I don't have that morning glow, whether or not I like getting up in the morning, which I do. And my wife mentioned it. She's so funny. She's so blunt about everything, and that's why I love her. But I post some videos on YouTube as well, some shorts for this podcast, and I use an AI tool. It kind of cuts it for me. It makes it easier. Oh, it's called Opus Clip if you're curious. But I did it one time in the morning. I actually recorded the podcast intro. You may have remembered it. I don't know. I didn't look my best. I had a little bit of a red nose because I used one of those nose strips. And I just looked very tired. And she's just like, you need to not make your videos in the morning. I was like, oh no, what happened? She's like, you looked haggard in that video, and all of the shorts for that intro that you recorded in the morning is just not your best time. And it's fine. It doesn't offend me. I just laughed. I was like, you're right. I noticed that. But it was one of those things where I just chose to ignore it because I was like, I'm not re-recording this. I don't want to do this again. You're going to get what you get. But anyway, long story short, social media in the early morning, not going to happen. So I just need to find the right timing during the day to post social media videos. Whether or not I'm prepared just takes that time. So we'll see if I can figure it out. I'll keep brainstorming and maybe I'll find the right time to post, to make and post videos. In any case, I believe that's everything in terms of updates. So as an extra reminder, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can head to patreon.com/the casual author. That's patreon.com/the casual author. It's just a couple dollars a month. If you're interested, love your support. Obviously, no pressure. I am hoping to get back into the homestead updates or the Q&A updates. Fell off the bandwagon a little bit on that as well, but I should say fell off the cart. I don't think fell off the bandwagon is the right thing. It definitely fell off the cart. Regardless, yes, would love your support if you can. The last thing I will say, and I failed to mention this, is Demon Blooded, which I'm currently going through edits on now. I'm posting chapters every week for that book to Ream. So if you want kind of early access to those chapters, you can get them at ream.com/ I believe it's Dan Kenner. I'll add that to the show notes. So yeah, it's just a couple dollars a month as well. If you want to get early access to that book, then you can. But yeah, that's everything for updates. We can go ahead and shift over to the interview portion with the author. Hey Bob, how you doing today?
I'm fine.
Fine. I love that answer. Short and sweet and hopefully indicative of your day. I'd love to hear more about you and your books, and I'm ready to dive into that. How long have you been writing and publishing?
I started writing in high school.
Okay.
My history teacher proposed that we write a historical novel or historical essay, fiction, and I didn't enjoy history that much until I got to that, and I got an A+ on it, and I've been writing off and on ever since. I ended up being the editor of the French teachers newsletter, the council newsletter for the province of New Brunswick. I wrote some articles for the provincial teachers newsletter, got a prize for one of them, and it resulted in them changing their language policy
Hmm.
for the province. So that gave me a little bit of understanding of the power of the pen. And
Absolutely.
I wrote another article recently about child molestation and the ministry.
Hmm.
I got confronted with a situation as a teacher where I discovered that a pastor was molesting children for probably 25 years. Everybody knew. They moved him around from one country to another, and he still kept molesting. And I discovered that people were being told not to report. And because you do not take the law against your brother. And I differed because I was a teacher and I was a required reporter.
Hmm.
This guy was in another state, and I knew none of his victims, but people had been talking to me, so I reported him to the police. He got 35 years to life, and I wrote an article about what should be done. I studied the legal aspects of it and the biblical interpretations of the difference between crimes and civil lawsuits. And it was quite an extensive article that I put a lot of time into, and I believe it made a huge difference. I understand that a clergyman basically used my theme for a full sermon at a convention.
Hmm.
And I was quite surprised, pleasantly, that I had actually made my point. Apparently, it had been passed around enough that people decided there was merit in what I was writing. And the result of that is having results even today, because the FBI is investigating hundreds of child sexual molestation by the ministry in several countries right
Hmm.
now, and it's a major scandal. But it's the teacher that told me the pen is more powerful than the sword. I tend to believe.
Absolutely.
I got
So, sorry, continue.
I got a job in 2020 as secretary of the Nevada State Senate Finance Committee.
Okay.
And all of the writings were long documents that are preserved for posterity. And it was very technical and very precise. But I really appreciated the learning experience that I got from it. Then I had my own experience to write about. And I had to disentangle myself, and that's my story. It was too long to tell in one setting, and I needed to sort it out for myself. And I spent about 7 or maybe 8 years making my notes and organizing the whole story so that I could make my statement and have it done. Now I write fiction.
I think that's awesome. That's very cool. But when did you know, or how do I say this? How did you build up the courage to write this content, knowing that it would cause anger? I'm sure you get lots of angry messages and unrest from people. Did you ever feel concerned about writing that, or was that never an issue?
Oh, yes. Oh, certainly. I grew up in this fundamentalist type new religious group, and this is the group that I found myself dealing with child sexual abuse. And being a teacher and being a parent and being a grandparent, I was quite horrified. And the situation was such that I knew perfectly well what would happen to me if I openly went to the police and complained to the clergy. I knew that I would be isolated, marginalized, kicked out, whatever, because that was normally the process. So when I reported to the police, I told no one. I didn't even tell my wife because I was afraid that she'd make a slip and tell someone, and then they would have a story made so that when the police came to check them, they would get their story right. I wanted them all to be taken by surprise so that they didn't have any preconceived notion of what they should be saying. And that's how it turned out to be. I had people coming to me previously and asking me what I thought of this situation. And I would tell them what I thought, but I would not tell anyone what I did. And one of the people that I told gave the name to I gave his name to the police as a contact person for what was going on. And he asked me if I would tell him if I had reported him to the police. And I said, no, I wouldn't tell you. But I found out that about 2 years later, after the trial, that they had kind of taken credit for it, that they sent a letter around telling people that, the right thing had been done with this guy, which was really surprising because I know that people had been told not to call the police. I had several versions of what happened that weren't quite true. And so that's what I did. Then it got complicated because they attempted and prosecuted a young man and his alleged fiance at the time of they accused him of sexual seduction of a minor. He was over 21 and she was under 18. But it was rumored by everybody that she was his fiance, and I was told that she and her mother had been out looking at houses, what kind of house that they would buy. And then we were all told that he was a child predator. We should not let him near our house. We should call the police if he showed up. And I objected to that because I knew exactly what they permitted the pastor to do. He was raping little kids. And this guy, they were not even having sexual intercourse. And that disturbed. The other thing that disturbed me was that we were told a story about how he had been arrested. And it turned out that while he was being processed through the court, that my daughter was assigned to supervise him because she worked for parole and probation. And she got so disturbed when she read the report that she told me I had to investigate. And it went from there. The clergy were not pleased at all when I accused them of lying. It got me. It was the beginning of my difficulties with group, and it went on there. And there were lots of complications, and I took quite a beating emotionally until my doctor told me that I had to leave the group for my health. And so that's what this is all about. But it was a great relief to have it written.
Yeah.
I had told my story. It was complete. And if anyone asked me where I learned every word that I wrote, I could tell them where it came from. And it was never more than second person. And anyone that wants to argue about that should ask me. But I've received wonderfully supportive comments from many countries of the world for writing that particular book because I analyzed the whole psychological work that I dealt with. And a few ex-pastors have told me that it helped them better understand what had happened to them. So that gave me quite a boost of self-satisfaction to get that done. I don't have to remember all the details now because I wrote it so that it would be exact and I could forget the.
Right. Kind of allowed you to set them aside and forget about that. It's a
Yes.
very
Yeah.
cathartic experience, I can imagine. So
Yes, it was really.
how do I say this? What led you down the path of I want to write novels about this, right? Because you've written your novel about, I guess it's more of a memoir about your experience leaving that specific group, but you've also wrote The Handmaiden's Diary, which I believe has similar themes in it, correct? Which is a fiction book. Am I
Yes,
understanding
the,
that?
the the three novels are about, they're all related.
Hmm.
There are similar characters, but growing up in this group, there were always things that happened that I found amusing or disturbing or strange, and I was always getting in trouble for pointing something out
Hmm.
that I thought was out of order. And then people would get angry because I said it. And then they'd talk about it. And I'd hang around until they said, well, that was right. I wasn't wrong. And they didn't have to tell me. They figured out I was right because I knew I was right. But there were all these interesting things that happened that would make good stories. And I had written quite a few stories, short stories through my lifetime for my kids and that. So I decided, I might as well do this now that I'm retired. I have time to put into it. And I had gained a lot of experience writing, and I enjoyed entertaining people kind of in a way. As a family, we'd get together and we'd have some good laughing sessions, teasing each other and carrying on and enjoying all the funny things that we could write about. And then there were some serious things too that you can't discuss in polite conversation.
Right.
And so I wanted to make kind of a public stand on those things. And I never really played with other kids. I used to make things for them to play with.
Hmm.
And so this is what I did with my novels.
That's interesting. Very. So, what was the most difficult part about writing these books? Just the subject matter itself, or was there something else that was difficult about it?
Originally, I had to convince myself that I could write this
Hmm.
despite the kickback that I could get.
Right.
But I was quite prepared for what happened when it finally came down to the wire that I had to leave. And then I had already dealt with being honest about how I felt about everything, and it made it easier for me to write. But of course, when you're writing a novel, you have to learn how to organize, and you have to learn how to write it so that it's easy to read.
Very true.
And I spent quite a bit of time reading and studying all various writing techniques and how to organize the words in a sentence so that you read it more easily. It's quite interesting how, from the writer's point of view, how you write so that the person gets through it easily and understands what you're talking about.
True. So, how did you go about teaching yourself those skills? Did you have like courses that you went through, or did you just do excessive reading and studying through books? What did that look like?
I read a lot of the books. I read a lot, and I read a lot of self-help books
Hmm.
and how to write novels, how to edit yourself books, and all of these things I took quite seriously because I've always been interested in writing. Even before I went to school, I was kind of fascinated with what was on paper that people could read, and it was there for everyone to see.
I think that's amazing and very cool that there's all those resources out there that you can, teach yourself. I know there's tons of books and courses and all sorts of things that help people, but I think the trick is knowing which ones to look for. So did you have a list of recommendations that you worked off, or were you just
Well,
curious and you had the time, so you just read everything?
no, I wanted to write, but I didn't. Two things I wanted to do when I wrote
Hmm.
was I wanted it. to sound believable.
Sure. Okay.
And I wanted people to be wanted it to be easy enough to read so that they would read it with interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always fully aware of that. And there's an excellent book that I got. It was called The Marshall Plan for Novel Writing.
Okay.
And I really studied that book really in depth before I started writing my first novel. And that made it quite easy for me to organize my material. I figured
Very
that out because the lady that was proofreading for me, I would write a chapter and email it to her. She would read it to her husband, and they would make comments to me about it. And one night I got a phone call after I had sent them the latest chapter, and they they wanted to know what was coming next because
They
I had
didn't
left
like
them
that it ended.
I had
Yeah.
left them hanging.
That's a good sign.
So that's a good sign. Yeah.
That's very
That
cool.
was that was the Marshall Plan.
Okay. So what advice do you have for someone who maybe they have story ideas, they've never written a book before, about organization? Do you have any quick tips for someone who doesn't know how to organize their thoughts and stories?
Plan.
Okay.
Make a flow chart. I did not appreciate it in high school when my English teacher needed an outline ahead of time.
Mm,
I did not appreciate that at all. But if you're going to write a novel and keep people interested from one chapter to the next, you have to make sure that you don't tell them everything in the first chapter. If you can make them wait until just about the end, it's worth reading.
yeah, definitely it works in your favor. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are that there are authors out there that don't plan. They just write, so to speak, by the seat of their pants. That's something that you've ever experienced or you know anybody like that?
I'm familiar, and I don't read a lot of this type of fiction, but there's a lot of, I suppose you could call it Christian fiction, where people are always they'll write people's testimonials about they get saved or
Hmm.
how everything went smoothly and they had a problem, but there was always the happy ending
Mm,
kind of thing. I'm not terribly interested in that part of a story. I'm interested in how they deal with the problem within their religious parameter.
I
Uh,
see.
and it makes it for an interesting story because people who don't know about these groups are curious, but they can't always go around getting inside them, seeing how they operate. There are psychological things that happen that a lot of people don't have to deal with.
So where did you gain the knowledge around the psychosis or the psychology around the situations and the people in these religions and situations? Just through lots of reading, or did you find yourself having to do lots of research?
Well, I live near a state college.
Okay.
And one of my favorite pastimes, well, I was still teaching when I would do this, but one of my favorite things to do was to take a course at evening
Oh, cool. Yeah.
at the college. And almost every semester I would take a course. And one of the topics that I was interested in, of course, was religious studies, not theology, but the history of religion and such. And I have the equivalent of a bachelor's degree in religious studies.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't need any other degrees to my name, but I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was talking about when I wrote. And so I met some very interesting people. And when you sit in a class with Muslims, you learn things. When you sit in a class with pagans, you learn things. And it was quite a variety of experiences that I got out of all those courses that I took.
Yeah. I can
I'm
imagine it
I'm
was really cool.
I'm a history buff, so I got into history too, and all the ancient history and all of that was quite fascinating.
I think it's funny because before you said when you were in high school you didn't like history, and now you're a history buff, and that's your thing.
Well, Yes, and I turned out I'm kind of an anomaly. I lived for 40 years. I was born in Canada
Okay.
and came to Nevada on my 40th birthday.
Okay.
And when I got here, I came here as a foreign exchange teacher to teach French for the year.
Oh, okay.
Then we decided we would stay, and they hired me to teach, of all things, U.S. history and government
Well, there you go.
to students in high school that I had been in the year before as the French teacher.
Interesting.
And then I gradually separated into full-time history and government teacher, and I took courses at night school for legal secretary,
Hmm.
so that I was I was quite confident to speak about legal matters, not as an attorney, but
Like an expert or advisor.
yeah, I was what they call the high school's Monday morning legal counsel because kids that got in trouble over the weekend.
That is awesome.
I had one student who told me that the judge told him to congratulate his government teacher because he said all the right things in court.
That is funny. You're coaching them on the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's wonderful. You've had an amazing experience with the beginning of your writing in high school, all the things you've written up until this point. What's up for the future? Are you writing more books that are historical fiction? Are you writing more books on the topics or branching out to other topics?
I want one more novel on the cultic kind
Hmm.
of experience. I also have lesson plans that I'd like to have published for courtroom procedures in high
Hmm.
school. For the justice system, I used to write crime stories, pull them apart into diaries for each of the witnesses, and all the witnesses would be in one of my government classes. And then the trial would be held in the other class with the
Hmm.
judge, the attorneys, all of the people that would conduct the trial, and then they had to do it themselves. The attorneys would interview all the witnesses, their case, and the principal gave me a conference room for the jury to go and deliberate in, and they would ask me what the outcome was supposed to be, and I wouldn't tell them. I said, the lawyers are there to case, and I got a couple of attorneys out of that exercise too. That
That's very cool. It sounds like a very immersive, great experience for this was
I
a high
I
school in Las Vegas. Is that right?
well, this one was in a high school up near Carson City,
Oh,
Reno
okay.
area. But I came down here to Las Vegas later on,
Mm,
2004. I down.
very
But
cool.
I have all of these stories that I got the kids to use in school that I'd like to get them written up so that teachers could buy them, because most teachers don't have or don't want to take the time to come up with such things. But I'm just that creative. I make a story and see what I get out.
I love it. I think that's so cool. And what a great opportunity you can provide to teachers to have similar experiences with their students. So very
Yeah,
immersive.
yeah. And a normal trial like in school like that, the it would take about 3 weeks
Hmm.
for the trial. The bailiff got the hall passes for the witnesses to come out of the other classes to testify. The bailiff took them. That was their subpoena
Mm.
to come to come to court.
Huh. Very cool. I mean, I vaguely remember my U.S. history class in high school, but definitely wasn't that exciting. We didn't do anything cool like that. So
No.
I think that's very cool.
Oh,
Oh,
the kids just loved it. They thought that they were doing, once they found out that there wasn't a set ending, that they had to do this all themselves,
hmm
then it was quite a serious matter.
hmm
And the result was really interesting because I had one jury member complain because the judge didn't have anything to do.
That's funny. Maybe they should have been the judge then, so that they wouldn't have. Were they just jealous because they had to do work?
And no, I don't think that was his problem.
Well, this has been a great conversation. We are running a little bit short on time though, so before we end here, I just want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to learn where they can find more information about you and your books. It sounds like you have a website coming out soon.
Yes, I'm not sure exactly when it's going to be online, but it will be Bob Williston, BobWilliston.com.
Very cool. And until then, where else can they find your books and
Well,
information
go
about you?
go to publish. They can order the books from gotopublish.com. And one of the book the Disentangle, the memoirs book, I think it's available on Amazon, but I think it's also available from, if you look up Litfire, Litfire,
Mm-hmm.
Litfire Publishing. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, I'm sure I'll be able to find it. I
Yeah,
haven't. Live
publishing.
Fire Publishing.
I think they're out of business, but the books can still be printed because they're print on demand.
Mm-hmm.
So the printer is obviously printing for people that want to buy the book.
Okay, this is perfect information. I'll make sure to add that to the show notes so people can make sure to find it.
Yes, yeah, it's going to appear on the website as well as
It's
the
great.
three other. Yeah,
It's great to have a website. So I'm
I,
excited for you to get
I
that up.
I'm presently working on a biography of a lady in the same group
Hmm.
that had a very tragic life story. Many countries, several languages, and lots of tragic experiences.
So this is a true story.
It's this is a true story. Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like some really cool things in your future. Excited
Oh,
to see those
I
books come out.
this isn't work. This is interesting, creative stuff for me to do.
Absolutely. I can understand that. It's a creative outlet for me as well. So it's a great experience.
Keeps me from vegetating in my old age.
I think we could all use a little bit of that regardless of our age in preparation for the years to come. So,
Yes, yes,
well, very good. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been amazing.
yes. Thank you.
I hope you found that insightful. I know that we talked about some really heavy and hard topics. Unfortunately, life isn't always perfect. There are some uncomfortable things, truths, so to speak. So, but I thought it was very interesting, his perspective on words and how they can fight the fight for you and how there's just so much power behind them. I hope you take that to heart as you go about writing your books. So, this next episode, I don't know if it'll be next week or the week after. I haven't quite decided yet. I wish I could be a little bit more clear with you. But the next interview that we'll have is with Elizabeth Drysdale. We talk a little bit about how she had adjusted her author strategy to bring her to more success. She talked a little bit about, her querying process. We go a lot into the querying process for getting a publisher, ultimately how she secured a contract and how that's going for her today as an author. So those shifts and adjustments in strategy are super key to make sure that you're moving in the right direction as an author. So if you have questions, comments, I'd love to hear where you're listening to the podcast. Definitely comment on the YouTube channel, on the podcast episodes, wherever you're listening. I'd love to hear from you. But thanks for listening today, and I look forward to talking to you next week.